All right then, folks, and welcome back to another fantastic edition of Opali Presents Know Your Pros. And today's guest, we have Jessica Henderson of J Henderson Law. And Jessica, of course, is Ventura's estate planning and probate attorney. She tells folks to protect yourself, protect your family, and preserve those assets. She is fantastic at preventative planning and serves all of Ventura County, but is right here in little old Ventura, California. Jessica, it's such a privilege to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you for having me on the show.
Jessica, I had to kind of twist your arm a little bit to hop into this thing, but I really desperately wanted to have you as a guest just because you've got such a great story. I go through the why of all of my guests every time I have somebody in here. But your why is special, and we'll get into the best part of it here a little bit later. But before we do that, the first why is, why did you start your own business? And I think that came from you being a workers' comp defense attorney. You were working for another firm. And I want to get a little bit of that story. What led you into this space where you were like, man, I'm starting my own practice. I'm getting into estate planning and probate.
Yeah, so my background is in work comp defense, and I was in that industry for a very long time, about 16 years. And it was helping insurance companies basically mitigate money. And so I wanted to have a career that was more rewarding and helping people on a personal level. So I decided to make the transition to estate planning and open my own firm instead of going to another firm, so that I can have the flexibility of, my time management, because I have a family. I have 2 kids and, married. So I wanted to have that flexibility within my own calendar and setting my own schedule.
Well, I think it's so neat too to hear about how you did work comp defense, and I could almost hear it like in your voice where you're just like, well, I'm really just making sure that the insurance companies get paid, or I'm working with the worst clients or working with the worst businesses. And maybe that wasn't the case for everybody, but with estate planning and probate, that's a personal thing. That's something that, has to do not just with like assets, but family members. It has to do with homes and legacies that people have built throughout their lifetime, which is really important. Of course, I want to understand, with my second question always being, hey, why this specific industry? We can talk about that, but I want to talk just a little bit about like the dreaded probate process. We went through it pretty extensively before we started shooting, but the whole reason that you exist is to keep families out of that probate process. They can call you if they find themselves in that, but the best laid plans are those that you lay out before anything bad happens. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Right. Yeah. So there's, first of all, this big misconception that a will prevents probate and will protect your assets and will basically give that distribution to your family or whoever it is you want to get. But the reality is it doesn't happen that way. In California, a will generally does go through probate. So a will doesn't really prevent the probate process and doesn't protect your family. And a living trust does. A living trust is a very easy, seamless way of transferring title of your assets to your trust, so that later on it can be transferred back to whoever it is that you want. And it's usually my clients, it tends to be their children. So the probate process is very timely and it's expensive, and it can create disputes between family members. So I like to help families prevent the probate process and give them peace of mind during their lifetime that their children or their family is going to be okay and be able to receive those assets or distributions, once they've passed away and they're ready to receive them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, like when I think about the probate process, or just like passing down assets from generation to generation, sometimes like I think of the 4th season of Succession, where the father, the magnate, the media mogul Logan Roy, like has written on a piece of paper who his successor is going to be, and they debate whether his son is underlined or crossed out on that sheet of paper. It's a huge, emotionally roiling sort of moment, and it turns out to be incredibly costly for the Roy children in this show. It's insane. But there's so much of that you can just prevent with a little bit of planning by visiting you and getting a living trust done. That is what you do for almost every single person who comes through your door here, right? And I heard that there's a misconception about, getting a living trust and needing to have a ton of wealth or a ton of assets. California, that's a little different, right?
Right. California, I mean, just owning a home, you're wealthy right there. And the probate threshold is $184,000 or $184,500. So
Uh-huh.
it's actually really low. And anyone who owns a home in California usually meets that threshold just based off their fair market value of their home right now. It doesn't matter how much you paid for your home or how much you owe on your home. Just owning a home here, you already have that value. And that's enough right there for probate. You don't have to have millions of dollars or, a large savings account or large retirement account like we normally see in movies or in TV shows. That's a misconception about a living trust and who needs it.
Right. Well, if you can tell me where the $184,000 homes are in California, I would really love an
Right.
inside track. If you could just point me in that direction.
Me too.
Well, I mean, like we could talk about the probate process forever here, Jessica. I mean, like I love hearing about this and better understanding what it takes to get, that generational wealth or that asset, or that plan down to the next generation. But really, to you, it's kind of a personal practice here. I mean, this is such a probably more energizing and more personal side of law that you're able to get into, since you're working with families, you're working with homeowners, you're working with people who have something to lose. And my last question is always, hey, why should somebody come to you over the next estate planning attorney or the next probate attorney? And I know you've got, somewhat of a story here. You've been affected by this with your family. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. I've experienced what not having a plan can do to the family. In my family, and my family actually encourages me to share this story. My niece and nephew, they both lost their parents when they were very young. They were 9 and 12, and they ended up with guardians who were appointed through the court. And after that, they were split up. So they didn't grow up together living in the same home.
Hmm.
And no parent wants that for their children. Um, you know, turns out, I mean, they turned out to be great people and human beings, and we love them. But that's something that can happen to anyone. It's not something that we plan on, and so that can be prevented though with the right planning. And also, I've had other loss in my family where they did have homes and assets that needed to be distributed, and there were no plans. So it just creates confusion and stress, and it's a very complex process to navigate through if you don't have the planning in place and you don't understand what you need to do. So I like to help families prevent what I went through and what my family went through, and save them some money later down the road also for their family to have, and give them some peace of mind during their lifetime so they can just enjoy life and not worry about what's going to happen to their children or their family later on.
Right. Well, I mean, it's saving money, and I mean, it's also saving grief, right? You never know what can happen in this crazy thing called life, right? It's unpredictable, and it has an end. It's not infinite, right?
Right.
Like I said, the best laid plans, are ones you often don't think about. But if you can get some preventative coverage, come in and visit somebody like you here, Jessica, I think that you're taking the right step, not only for yourself, but your family and your future generations too. So that's impactful. Folks, I encourage you to, if you want to learn more about Jessica's story, she's got a fantastic one. I would love it if everybody out there watching could give her a call. And that's what I want to ask you to tell our viewers here right now, Jessica. Can you tell people how they can get in touch with you, where they can visit you too? I know you've got a new office that you just opened up, right?
Yeah, I was virtual when I first started the firm, and I have a location now in Ventura. I'm at 255 Maple Court, Suite 120 in Ventura. But you can also reach me by calling me or texting me on my cell phone, 805-203-6141. And I have a website as well where you can contact me through, and it's jhendersonlaw.com. So yeah, you can come visit or give me a call or text me, and I'd love to meet, your viewers and have a discussion with them.
Yeah, well, of course. And folks, I mean, everything as usual is in the description, so check that out. Go engage with Jessica's socials, check out her website. She makes it really easy if you're trying to book a consultative appointment over, phone call or there in the office. You can do that right out of her Google listing, which is pretty fancy.
I have Instagram as well and Facebook. I didn't mention that. Yeah.
Instagram.
And they're all the handles are J Henderson Law.
J Henderson Law. It's hard to forget, folks. Check her out. That's Jessica Henderson. She is Ventura's estate planning and probate attorney, reminding you to protect yourself, protect your family, and preserve those assets. I encourage you all to give her a call today. Jessica, thank you so much for making the time to jump on our little show today.
Thank you, Henry. It was a pleasure.
Now you're pros.